We're at the Mishnah on the top of Pei Amud Aleph. Halakech perish shevach mechaver. Someone who purchases the produce of a coop from his friend. So that means the coop has they keep their pigeons or their doves, their birds. So what the coop produces is more birds. That's what it's for. Mafriach brecha rishayna. The seller retains, he separates mafriach. Mafriach means to fly away, but in this case it means to keep for yourself. He separates the first brace of pigeons. I think that's the English word for a pair of pigeons. The first brace of pigeons. The way it works with these doves, I shouldn't say pigeons, they're doves. Doves give birth once a month. So, and they give birth to a matched pair of a male and female. So the first month's male and female doves remain together with the mother that produced them. As the Gemara is going to explain, the doves need companionship. That's what the expression lovey-dovey comes from, right? For some reason, they're like a symbol of mating.
Loyalty also.
What?
Loyalty also.
Loyalty, right? So, yeah. They stay together. They stay with their mates. So in any case, this mother dove needs to have companionship. She needs to have some mishpacha around. So you keep the first pair from that year's, so the first set. Every month they give birth to another one. The first set stays with the mother because you're only selling the peiros. You're selling what the shevach produces, but you don't want to ruin its ability to continue producing. If everyone leaves, then the mother will be despondent and she'll fly away. So you have to retain what you need in order that it should remain a productive coop, productive dove cut. Well, I'm just going to go to yeah, that's the first in the Mishnah. Peiros kaiveris. What about instead of the peiros of a dovecat, a person sold the produce of a beehive. So there are going to be two things that a beehive produces. First of all, believe it or not, it produces bees. And secondly, it produces honey. You would naturally more think toward the honey. But there are also beekeepers. I think that I think it's like an aviary. Maybe mixing it up with a bird. In any case, Paris Kadveris, if someone sold what his beehive is producing, Noitel Gimel Nechilim Umesaris. He takes 3 swarms of bees, and then he's Mesaris. So the Gemara is going to have 3 separate explanations of what exactly that means. What does the owner retain for himself, and what does it mean that he sold? And again, it's going to be the same concept. Whatever exactly it means that he keeps and what he's giving, it is he has to retain enough bees that his beehive remains a going concern. If he gave away all the bees, a beehive without bees is worthless. So he has to retain the minimum amount that it can continue be self-perpetuating. Chal is dvash, if instead of selling the bees of the year, he sold that year's honeycombs with their honey in it. Meniach beis chalas. The owner keeps for himself two honeycombs, obviously for the reason that, again, he wants to have his beehive be a going concern, and bees need honey. They eat the honey. They use that to sustain themselves. If you gave away all the honey, then the bees would all die. Zaysim lakuts. If someone gave the wood from his olive wood tree. He had an olive tree. He said, I'm selling to you the wood from this olive tree. He has to leave the bottom two branches. He can cut away the rest of the tree, but leave two branches. And that way the olive tree will regenerate. As long as you leave two branches, there's enough for it to regenerate. The Gemara is going to go through different other trees, how much you have to leave in order for them to regenerate. I can tell you there's a certain type of tree that grows in between my air conditioner and my house that I cut it down every year. It's like a bolt cutter, and it regenerates no matter how close to the ground I cut it down. That's going to be one of the kinds of trees. It's in a bad place. It's going to ruin my air conditioning, so I have to constantly be attacking it. But no matter what I cut, it comes back. I can't get underneath it to dig out the roots because it's in between the compressor and the house. So you can't really get in there. Can't dig it out. So in any case, a zayas is more delicate. So you have to leave two branches. You have to leave not just the trunk, but even two branches in order for it to be able to regenerate. Again, we're talking about, the Mishnah is talking about people who are selling something that they're selling the produce, but they're not selling the object that's making, they don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So we're going back to the first thing. We said, if someone buys a dovecat, he keeps the first pair, male and female chicks, to keep the mother company. We learned that it has to be not just a Rishon, but also the second one, because a second pair. Because the problem is, if you keep only the first pair, then who's going to keep them company? As we're going to see in the Gemara later on, well, it hasn't clarified this yet. The obvious question: why can't they be kept company by the mother? The answer is that a parent needs their children for company. Children are not interested in their parents; they need their own kids to keep them company. That's the way it works. So Amar Kahana lekasha, Allah ima. The Gemara, when it said, when we said Rishaynu Shniya, that means it's not really saying a different. We're not really saying a different svara. We're just saying that you need a Rishaynu Shniya. It's not that you need the first and the second one for the mother. Like we said, you need the first one is for the mother, and the second pair is for the first pair to keep them company. And the Rishonim are not sure if that means that that's already enough. At that point you did enough, or it means it goes on indefinitely. That you actually have to keep keeping from each child the first offspring to keep it company. We just mentioned the first two because we don't want to be repetitive, and for the shni you keep the third. So tomorrow, Maishna Ima the Mitztavsa Abarta Bazuga Tafshkila Ina. The Maishna Ima. Why is the mother stay? Because it's going to be comforted by its daughter and by a Barsa Bazuga and on its mate. Shafkinullah, that you leave it for her. Nami, why don't we say that the child also Testava Ima Bazuga the Shafkinullah? Why don't we say that the child, why do we say you have to leave over a second pair to comfort the first pair? Why don't we say that the mother should be like, well, this is the question that I mentioned you before. Why don't we say that the mother will comfort together with its mate? That should be enough to comfort. Why does it also need the pair underneath it to comfort the first pair? So like we said, a mother is comforted by having her children, but a daughter is not going to be comforted by having a mother. Other she looks at that as an imposition. She's just going to cramp my style. But if I have my child, then I could order her around, and that's much more fun. Exactly what Paris Keveris. We talked about the produce of a beehive, and we were talking about Paris of a Keveris. The first part of the Mishnah first talked about the produce being the bees, that a beehive produces bees, and he sold this year's production of bees. So we said, he keeps 3 swarms of bees that are produced by the beehive, and then he's Masaris. So Gemara understands this misaris to mean that he then stops the bees from producing any more bees. He's misaris them, he sterilizes them. So by he takes the person takes three swarms of bees, and at that point he stops it from producing any more. Because at a certain point, it's if you keep producing bees and taking them away, the bees are not going to be producing anything very good, and it's going to distract, I guess, from the function of the beehive that keeps on producing more. So Zakti Amara, the ma misars, and how are you misars bees? What is the procedure? Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, b'chardal. You give them mustard seeds. And the Gemara explains, it's not that eating this mustard causes them to be unable to procreate. Rather, because it gives a sharp taste in the mouth. They go back and they eat they go back and they eat the honey. And the Rashbam explains that we talks we also betels we periviredia. It's a very interesting thing. It says so. The point is he wants them to produce honey instead of being Isaac and perivirivia. That's why he's allowed to give them. The purchaser takes 3 swarms and then he gives them mustard. That makes them thirsty. They go and eat up the honey, and then because they're full of honey, now they don't procreate anymore, and then they get themselves busy making more honey. It's an interesting thing that we say that because it makes them eat up the honey, it makes them want honey. So now they, instead of reproducing, now they're going to make more honey. But that's the way it works. Rabbi Yechon Amar, what does it mean? Noitel shalosh nechilin masars, and he says the different thing. Noitel shalosh nechilin besirus. He teaches it not that you cause them to become sterile, but rather he says it means they take the person who's buying the bees takes the first 3 swarms, but he takes them besirus. He doesn't take them the first 3, but rather he takes 3. He takes one, then he leaves one for the owner, then he takes another one, he leaves another one. So besirus means like intermittent, that they non-consecutively, because that way you have one set of bees, one swarm stays to keep the hive going, and then the next one is given over to the purchaser. He says the way it works is, it doesn't mean that he gets that he only gets 3. It says he takes the first 3. The purchaser gets the first 3, and then afterwards he has to leave one swarm to keep the hive going, and the next swarm he gets to keep. So 3 different pshatim of what it means that he takes 3 nechilim besiris. If he sold the honey, he leaves 2 chalas. He has to leave 2 honeycombs for the hive to keep the hive going. Amrav Kahana, Dvash b'kayveres and yotzim b'dei meichel ha'olam. When you have dvash that's inside honey, that's inside a beehive, it never loses its status as a food. What does it make a difference whether something is a food? For tumah, there's only a few things that become tummy. A piece of wood can't become tummy. I don't think water can become tummy unless it became a mashka. It has to be a eichlin or mashkin or a kli or a person. Those are the 4 categories of things that become tummy. So the question is, there are a number of things that sometimes could be food and sometimes could be something else. Honey, for example, as we're going to see in the Gemara, it could be used for the bees themselves to perpetuate the hive. For example, cat food is not food for humans. It has to be food for humans. So honey, does that have a status so that it's considered to always be something that people will eat, and therefore it's makabel tumah immediately? Or is it something more like cat food? Cat food a person can't eat, but let's say a person decides there's a famine going on, and I got to eat some cat food. That's all I can afford. And he decides to eat it. At that point, it becomes a Michael and becomes Roy Lekabel Tumah. So he's saying that this honey in a, Rav Kahana says that the honey in a beehive, it's always going to be a Michael. He doesn't have to have specifically in mind that he's going to eat it. Honey is a food. You see from this that he holds you don't have to designate honey. You don't have to say, I have in mind that this honey should be a Michael, that I'm going to use it to dip my apple. As long as it's, since it's the etzem food, even though there are some of the honey gets eaten by the honeybees, but that's just part of their production. That's the way the honey is made, but it's etzem, it's food. Meisvei, the Gemara, devash b'keveres, ein loy oicha v'loy mashka. We have a brisa that says exactly the opposite, that the honey in a beehive is neither food nor a drink. It's intended to keep the honey, the bees going. So it's not considered a Michael, and therefore, or a mashka for that matter. It's a little bit viscous. So therefore, it's not makabel tumah. So Abaye has an answer. That brisa that says that the honey in a beehive is not oichel and not mashka, that's those two, like we said, the first two, when someone sells the honey from a beehive, it doesn't include the first two honeycombs, because those two honeycombs are needed to perpetuate the hive. So therefore, they're not intended for a person to eat. And every year, he's always going to have at least two honeycombs to keep the beehive going. So that's not intended to be food. That's part of the hive, and therefore it's not going to be makabel tumah. It's not going to be an oichel, it's makabel tumah. Rava Amar Rebbe Eliezer. Rava says that brisa is going like Rebbe Eliezer, and Rav Kahana, who said that chalish dvash bekeveres is always a Michael and it is makabel tumah. He doesn't hold like Rebbe Eliezer. The Tanam, where do we see the sheet of Rebbe Eliezer? Keveres on Amud Beis. Keveres var a beehive. Rebbe Eliezer Aymar Harei Karka. It's treated as karka, meaning even though this brisa is saying this Mishnah, is saying that honey is really a Michael, but it's still considered it's not able to be makabel tumah because it's considered like karka. As we're going to see, Rebbe Eliezer has a pasuk that tells him, we saw this a few blot ago. Eliezer learns from a pasuk that the hive together with its honey is all considered to be like attached to the ground, and something that's attached to the ground cannot become tamei. So therefore, it has the status of karka, and that's going to be a bunch of nafkaminas. Since it's karka, the koisanal prisbal, like we said before, every 7 years when Shemitah comes, all loans are canceled unless a person writes a prisbal. At the Chama Masakin, you only write a prisbal for someone who owns some karka. So we say, legabe this, the beehive will be, the person who owns a beehive is treated as someone who has karka, and you can write a prisbal on his loans. It's not makabel tumah. Like we said, this is what we're talking about. This is the nafkamina that we've been talking about, that it's treated like land, and therefore, as long as the honey is in the beehive, it's not going to be able to be makabel tumah. It's not going to be, even though it's a Michael, something that's attached to the ground is not makabel tumah. If someone to take the honey out of the beehive on Shabbos, it'd be the same thing as if you cut a stalk of wheat from the ground. You're separating something that's attached to the ground, like we said, because it's treated as karka. No, it's not karka in kaisan la prusbul. It's not karka to legabi writing a prusbul. Karka, it's not karka makabelis tumah, and therefore it's makabel tumah. Even when the honey is in the hive, it's still not karka, and therefore it's a Michael, and therefore it's makabel tumah. And someone who separates the honey from the hive on Shabbos is going to be potter. He didn't separate it from karka. He just separated from metaltalin and Michael. So therefore, we now have an explanation. Rav Kahana, who said that honey is a Michael, is always a Michael. He's saying like these Chachamim. And that brisa that we quoted, it said that honey is not a Michael, is going like Rebbe Eliezer, because he holds like it doesn't mean it's not a Michael, but it's considered to be attached to the ground and it's karka. Amr Balaza, my time of the Rebbe Eliezer. What's the reasoning for Rebbe Eliezer that he says that honey is karka? It's not karka. We could see it's a hive. It's not part of the ground. He says he dipped it in the forest of honey. What does honey have to do with the forest? It's coming to tell you that the honey in the hive is treated like a forest, similar to a forest. That a forest, if you cut down a tree in a forest, you chayiv chatas. I don't know if someone's going to hear you, but you still chayiv chatas. So too, taking honey from the beehive is going to be chayiv chatas because it's treated as karka. Meisvei. The Gemara is going to ask a kasha on Rabba's pshat that says, not that Abaya had answered the steer of the Rav Kahana from the Brisa, that the Brisa is talking about the two chalis devash that are needed to sustain the hive. And therefore, that's not considered a Michael because it's not being used, it's not intended to be eaten by people, it's intended to sustain the bees, so it never gets the status of a Michael. That was Abaya's status. Rabbah had said a different teretz. He said there's no nafkamina. We're not talking about those two combs because we don't know which is going to be which, and it's all treated the same. But he said it's an nafkamina whether you say like Rebbe Eliezer that's treated as karka, or if you say like the Chachamim. The Bryce over there was like Rebbe Eliezer who says treated like karka, but Rav Kahana was saying like the Chachamim who say it's not treated, that the honey is not treated as karka. Meisvei, correct there on Rabbi's pshat. Vash hazav mikivrase. The vash that oozes out of the beehive, so it's no longer in the beehive. It's not considered to be food. It's not going to be makabel tumah. So according to Abai, we have a good explanation of this. He would answer this the same way he answered the brisa, that it's talking about from those two honeycombs that were left to sustain the hive. So as long as those are considered to be part of the hive, they're not considered to be food. So even if it oozes out, its status remains the same. If a person would specifically have in mind that he wants to eat it, at that point it would become tamid. But up to that point, it's not oichel or a mashka because it's something that's designated to sustain the hive. Ella Rava kasha, but according to Rava is masking. Even according to Rebbe Eliezer, who says that the honey in the hive is considered to be karka. He was very careful to say, while it's in its place, not makabel tumah. That's all while it's in the hive. But as soon as it leaves the hive, it loses that status as being karka. And once it loses its status as karka, it immediately resumes its karka, its status as a Michael, which can be makabel tumah. You shouldn't need to have a machshava specifically to make it makabel tumah. So the Gemara gives two to we're talking about where it oozed from the hive, but it went directly onto something that's it's dirty. It went into a dirty kli. So a person wouldn't normally eat it in that status. So since it went straight from being karka into a place where a person wouldn't normally eat it, unless he specifically has a mind to eat it, it's not going to get the status of a Michael to be makabel tum. He says a similar teretz, it went on top of splinters, where you're going to have to remove the splinters in order to eat it. So therefore, it doesn't automatically get the status of a Michael to be makabel tumah until he removes the splinters or until he has a mind specifically that he's going to eat. Meisvei, devash bekivrasai, honey in its beehive, ain't a loy oichav alei mashka. It's not considered to be a oichel mashkin. Chishulav lachila betama tumas oichel mashkin. Betamas tumas oichel mashkin, betama tumas mashkin. So if you have in mind that you want to eat it, it does become a Michael to be makabel tumah. So Bishlam Abaye Nicha, according to Abaye, it's fine, because Abaye just said that we're going according to the Manda Amma that says we're talking about those two honeycombs that are designated for the hive. So therefore, if a person has in mind that he wants to eat it, so then now it becomes Roy Lachil, it's not going to be used for the hive anymore. According to Rava, that it's karka. What does it make a difference that he has in mind that he wants to eat it? It's still mechuber karka, and it can't become tummy. Amalach Rava tar tachi. Chishalav lachila ena metamatu zeichel lamashkin ena metamatu mismashkin. He swishes around. It's very convenient if you can do that. He just says, instead of saying that it does become tamei, it says that it doesn't become tamei. It says the conclusion of the brisa is exactly the opposite of the way we had first read it. So it very much verifies what he said. It's going according to Rebbe Eliezer, and it's saying that even if you have in mind that you want to eat it, it's not going to change because it's karka. Tanya Kavasiv Kahana. Now Gemara is going to bring a brisa that supports Rav Kahana's shita. Dvash bekivrosai metama tumasayichlin shaloi b'machshava. Dvash inside of its in the beehive is makabel tuma shaloi b'machshava, and you'll understand it according to Abaya or Rabba's explanation how it accords with the other brisa. Zok the Gemara. Zeisim lokutz meniach shtei grufiyos. We said in the Mishnah, if someone sold the wood that comes out of an olive tree, the purchaser has to leave. He can cut off the wood, but he has to leave the bottom two branches so that the tree can regenerate. Tan Rabban halekech ila mechaveri lokutz. This din, we're talking about someone who bought the lumber from a tree, the wood from a tree. Magviyam nakarka tefach v'kaitzes. He can. This is talking about a fruit tree, I think. He has to leave one tefach from the karka, and he could cut above that, and that's enough for it to regenerate. Besulas hashikma, a uncut sycamore tree, gimel tvachim. You have to leave over 3 tvachim. Sadan hashikma, mature shikma, base tvachim. You only need to leave over 2 tvachim in order for it to regenerate. Bekanim b'kfanim, by reeds and by vines, minapkak. You have to cut it off from the first knot. You have to wait, like a bamboo, right? You know, they have those knots on the bamboo every couple of feet. So the first knot over the ground, you have to leave there, and that's where it's going to regenerate from. Ulamaila. B'tkalim, by a palm tree, ubarozim, and by cedars, chayfer umesharish. You can dig out the roots and take the whole thing. Cut it down and dig out the roots. Because these kind of trees have no ability to regenerate at all. So it doesn't make a difference. If you cut off anything, it's going to die. So we said a bunch of different trees. What happens? So Basula Shikma, we said, Gimel Tvachim Bina. We said it needs 3 Tvachim. Is that true? For a mini, Ein Kaitzes and Basula Shikma B'Shvias, one cannot cut a young shikma that's never been cut down before on Shvias. You're not allowed to do anything to improve a tree on Shvias. Maybe she avoided it. It's considered an avoida because it improves it. Rabbi Yehuda, most of the Rishonim explained this, that Rabbi Yehuda is explaining the Tanakam. Rabbi Yehuda, what does that mean? Kedarkai aser means it's aser to do it in the regular. What he can do is he can cut it off more than 10 tfachim from the ground. Or he could cut from the root. Either one of those things, those don't help the tree, those harm the tree. So it's not considered to be an avodah that you're working to improve the tree on Shvias. So the Gemara asks this question. It sounds like he could cut it from the ground, but he can't cut it 1 tefach or above the ground, or 2 tefachim above the ground. Anything more than cutting it off at the ground is a mila for it. It's also to do on Shvias. So why did we say that the shikma hapsula, the uncut shikma, you can only cut down to 3 tefachim? It sounds from this brisa that anything above the ground is an advantage, and it will grow back. So why is the purchaser precluded from cutting it all the way down to the ground? Amrabai gimel tefachim malila. He says it's because there's 3 stays. Anything above 3 tefachim is good for the tree. And from the ground is definitely bad for it. In between, it's neither bad for the tree or good for the tree. It means that it's in between. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. So on Shvius, you have to do something that's for sure bad for it. Otherwise, you're taking the chance you're being over on Shvius by helping it. A person who sells his tree, the produce of his tree, he still wants to retain for himself. He wants to be sure that his tree will regrow. And the only way that it's certainly going to be good for the tree, that it's not going to hurt it, is if it's over 3 tvach. The Gemara says, right, we said by palm trees and cedar trees, you can cut it down to the ground because that's not going to grow back anyway. Is it true that a cedar doesn't regrow? What does the pasuk mean that a tzaddik will sprout or will blossom like a tamar, like a palm tree, and he's going to grow like a cedar in Lebanon, which is the place where you get the best cedars. Why do we have to say 2 examples of how a tzaddik will grow? If we would have just said the cedar and not said the palm tree, I would say just like a sycamore doesn't produce any fruit. Maybe a tzaddik also won't get any fruit, which we understand to mean that tzaddik will not get any benefit in Olam Hazeh. All his benefit will just be in Olam Haba, or it will mean maybe that even it means the other way around. He'll be okay in this world, but he's not going to get any payers in Olam Haba. That's why we also said a palm tree that produces dates. Maybe it will be like a tamar that if you cut it down, it doesn't regrow. Maybe it's tzaddik also, if you cut it down, he won't grow, which we shouldn't say that means that he won't have children, or his whatever he does will not. If he's going to fall down, if he's going to have some kind of nefila, he won't be able to be resilient and get back from it. And we know that's not true, right? Shevi people tzaddik become. We know that a tzaddik isn't often falls down and gets up. My Rabbi always used to say, Rabbi Zikri, say it's not. I think it's from Rabbi what's his name, from the Mir, the mashgiach from the Mir. That a tzaddik, in order to be a tzaddik, you have to fall down. It's a requirement. You can't really succeed without falling down and growing from your mistakes. They learned the most from their mistakes. These who never did an avera, maybe when they were children, before they were bar mitzvah. You can't ask a kasha on a musa. Right?
You can ask a shayla on the shumais.
You can have an afila in his midas. He never did an avera. I don't know. Maybe the taka, that's what we say. That means it could be, when you say it's tzaddik, means you can reach a different level with your nefila than you could have otherwise, right? We say that Bal Tshuva can reach a higher level than someone's a tzaddik gamar. So it means that when we say you can't be a tzaddik without the nefila, it means the level of that you potentially could reach. In any case, but in any case, the problem is that we're saying that a tamar does not regrow, and but a eres does. So why did we say in this brisa that a eres does not regrow? We said there are many different types of arazim. The Rabbi Barafuna, which you've had a number of times throughout Shas. Rabbi Barafuna, Ami Beirav. Yud mini arazim. There are 10 different types of trees or growths that are called like a cedar. Shenemar etem b'midbar eres shita b'hadas b'eit shemen osim. The pasuk goes on and lists 7 things. Eres is arza. Eres is talking about a cedar. Shita turnisa. Shita is a different tree. Hadas asa, and hadas is the hadasim that we use on a myrtle tree that we use on sukkahs. Eit shemen aparsamo. That's I think balsam wood. Barush, barsi, Baristers, referring to the baristry tree, Tahadar, Sha'aga, Ta'asher Shurbina. I don't remember the touch. Hani Zayin Havi. Hani Zayin Havi. That's only 7, and you said there are 10. Because Ravdimi Amar, Azinalim, Aloinim, Almoinim, Almugim. Aloinim Butni, Aloinim Al Butni, Almoinim Al Bluti, and Almoigim Al Kasisa. Egdahami, Aroinim Almoinim Almugim, Aroinim Ari, Almoinim Dulvi, Almoigim Kasisa. Sorry, I'm not going to touch them, but you're welcome. Dovi can tell you what each one of those things are. Take care. Have a good Shabbos. See you on